The earth shook with the roar of the lion pack, but before fear could freeze her, a shadow leapt through the dust and fangs, pulling Clara from certain death. The late afternoon sun burned across the arid plains, casting long, jagged shadows over the scattered wooden cabins. Clara, 30 and weathered by years of hard labor on her small homestead, had been tracking a small creek for water when the lions struck. Their eyes glowed like molten gold, bodies coiled with lethal grace, and teeth gleamed in the fading light. Panic surged through her chest. An instinct screamed for her to run, but there was nowhere to go. A sudden fluid movement cut through the chaos. A man appeared, almost as if he had sprung from the rocks themselves. His skin glowed bronze in the dying sunlight, every muscle taut and controlled, his long black hair whipping around his face like living shadows. He carried no fear, only determination. As he lunged into the fray with a cry that blended command and defiance, he thrust a spear into the ground, sending one of the lions stumbling back. He grabbed Clara by the arm and swung her behind a jagged boulder, shielding her from a snapping jaw that glinted in the sunlight. The ground vibrated with the lion's pounding paws and the rhythmic thrum of her own heartbeat. Dust and blood mingled in the air, filling her lungs and making her gag. Clara's voice trembled as she clutched at his strong arm. Who are you?" she gasped, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. The man's gaze was steady, unyielding. Dark eyes, sharp as obsidian, scanned the horizon. "No time for names," he said, voice low and commanding. "Move." Before she could protest, he pulled her through a narrow ravine, dodging fallen branches and jagged rocks. Her shawl was torn, her dress stained with dust and blood, but she barely noticed. The roar of the lions faded behind them, though every nerve in her body screamed that danger still lingered. At last, they reached a secluded grove. Ancient oaks stretched their twisted limbs toward the sky, their leaves whispering secrets in the wind. The warrior knelt beside a small fire, its glow warm against the chill of fear still clinging to her bones. He handed her a thick blanket woven from leather and fur. Its texture was rough but comforting, the scent of smoke and earth grounding her racing heart. Clara sank to the ground, wrapping herself tightly, trying to draw courage from the stranger whose presence was both terrifying and magnetic. She noticed his adornments, turquoise beads, bone charms, and feathers woven into his long hair, each piece telling a story she could not yet decipher. Why did you help me?" she asked finally, her voice quieter now, laced with curiosity and wonder. He only shook his head, his expression unreadable. Without a word, he disappeared into the shadow of the trees, leaving Clara trembling in the firelight. The night was alive with sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a coyote, and the faint crackle of the fire as sparks danced into the dark sky. The smell of dust, blood, and the wild lingered, a reminder of the fragility of life. Clara's chest heaved as she tried to calm herself, every muscle taut, every sense alert. She realized that the plains were not merely a backdrop for her life. They were a living, breathing danger, full of hidden threats and unexpected guardians. Hours passed. The moon rose, silver and cold, casting a serene glow on the grove. Clara shivered, her mind spinning with questions. Who was this man? Why had he risked his life for her? And most importantly, what did it mean that he had disappeared as mysteriously as he had arrived? Somewhere deep inside, Clara sensed that this encounter was only the beginning. Her life, once predictable and quiet, had been irrevocably altered. In a matter of heartbeats. The warrior's presence lingered like a pulse in the night, a promise of protection, danger, and a world she had yet to understand. And as the wind whispered through the leaves, carrying the faint, haunting scent of the plains, Clara realized with a shiver that she had just crossed into a story far larger than herself, one of survival, courage, and a power she could scarcely imagine. Clara returned to her modest cabin the next morning, expecting solitude and quiet after the terror of the previous evening. Instead, she found something that stopped her breath entirely. Around her cabin, carefully arranged on the dusty ground, were small, deliberate piles of herbs, dried meat, and hand-carved charms. Each one seemed to pulse with intention, as if someone or something had been watching over her while she slept out. Her heart raced. She stepped closer, inspecting a bundle of cedar tied with leather string. The smell of smoke and pine mingled in her nostrils, comforting yet strange. Another pile contained dried venison wrapped neatly in leaves, while tiny bone carvings lay in careful formation near the door. Clara's hands trembled. She had never seen such devotion or ritual. She had lived alone on the plains for years, and yet here was evidence of a presence she could neither explain nor ignore. The sun climbed higher, gilding the cabin with warm light and casting long shadows across the wooden planks. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying faint sounds of hooves and the distant rumble of a drumbeat that made her pulse quicken. She felt awe, fear, and a strange gratitude all at once. The gifts weren't just offerings. They were warnings, promises, and perhaps demands. A rustle in the trees drew her attention. There, at the edge of the grove, he appeared. The warrior stood tall, shirtless, his bronzed skin gleaming in the sunlight, long black hair falling past his shoulders. His eyes, sharp and dark, held a mixture of scrutiny and quiet satisfaction. Around his neck, bone and turquoise jewelry caught the light, sparkling with each subtle movement. He approached silently, each step measured, like a predator moving through the underbrush, yet entirely controlled. Clara's breath caught in her throat. He didn't speak, but his gaze swept over the cabin and its strange offerings, acknowledging them with a slight nod. "You didn't have to do this," Clara said finally, her voice shaky. "I can manage. I'm alone, yes, but I've lived here for years." He shook his head slowly, a shadow of a smile ghosting his lips. "The plains are not kind," he said in a deep, commanding voice. "You do not survive alone." His words carried weight, not just as a warning, but as truth she could feel in her bones. The wind shifted, rustling the tall grass and carrying the faint scent of horses and leather. Clara realized that the gifts were more than protection. They were a language, a code she had not yet learned. Each piece told a story, each arrangement held meaning. She could sense the tribe's eyes upon her, even if she could not see them, and her chest tightened with a mixture of fear and fascination. Clara stepped back inside her cabin, heart pounding. She glanced out the window to see shadows moving silently along the tree line. The warrior remained outside, standing like a sentinel, his presence both comforting and unnerving. She felt as though she were being watched by spirits of the Lamb themselves, guardians who had decided her fate was now entwined with theirs. As the day wore on, Clara explored the gifts more closely. She noticed subtle carvings of animals, each one carefully chosen. Lions, wolves, and eagles, creatures that represented strength, courage, and vigilance. The dried venison was fresh enough to sustain her for days, and the herbs had medicinal purposes she recognized vaguely from old lessons her mother had taught her. Every detail was deliberate. Every detail spoke of thoughtfulness, skill, and the presence of a people who valued survival, honor, and ritual above all else. By late afternoon, Clara could no longer ignore the truth. Her life had changed overnight. Her once quiet existence on the plains, governed by solitude and cautious routines, was now entangled with a world she had not known existed, a world of warriors, tribes, and unspoken rules. The warrior had not just saved her life, he had introduced her to a new reality, one that carried both protection and peril. As the sun dipped low, casting the cabin in a golden glow, Clara wrapped herself in one of the tribal blankets, still feeling the warmth and reassurance of the gifts outside. The wind carried the faint sound of drums again, a distant rhythm that stirred something deep inside her. She realized that the plains, vast and untamed, were no longer a place she could face alone. And somewhere in that truth, buried beneath fear and uncertainty, was a flicker of hope she hadn't felt in years. The wind carried a cool whisper through the tall oaks as Clara followed the warrior to the edge of the grove. Every step seemed measured, deliberate, like he was moving in rhythm with the land itself. The morning sun filtered through the branches, casting dappled light across his bronzed, muscular torso and the intricate tribal jewelry that adorned his neck and wrists. Turquoise beads, bone charms, and feathers gleamed softly, reflecting a history Clara could only guess at. They stopped beside a small stream where the water ran clear, tinkling over smooth stones. Clara's mind raced with questions she had barely dared to voice since the rescue. "Why did your tribe help me?" she asked, breaking the silence. Her voice carried the faint tremor of lingering fear and awe. The warrior's eyes, dark and piercing, held hers for a long moment before he spoke. "Because the plains demand it. You were in danger, and it is our duty to protect life. The wild does not forgive weakness." His voice was deep and resonant, carrying authority without arrogance. Each word seemed carefully chosen, deliberate, as if every syllable carried the weight of generations. Clara glanced at the line of distant hills beyond the grove. The plains stretched endlessly, golden under the sun, but the beauty hid danger lions, coyotes, sudden storms, and worse. She realized the truth of his words. Survival here required strength, vigilance, and alliances she had never considered. The warrior motioned for her to sit on a fallen log. He remained standing, tall and alert, his gaze sweeping the grove, every muscle coiled as if ready to spring into action at any moment. Clara studied him quietly, curiosity overcoming her fear. "What is your name?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then said, "Makia." The name was simple, yet carried a rhythm that seemed to harmonize with the wind through the trees. Clara repeated it under her breath, letting it settle like a word that anchored her to a new reality. "Your tribe? They don't usually interfere with settlers," she said cautiously. "Why me?" Makia's expression darkened slightly, shadows flickering across his face as the sunlight passed through the branches. "We are not like other people," he said quietly. "We watch over these lands, guardians of life and balance, but there are rules. There are consequences. You were chosen not by chance, but because fate deemed you part of this balance for a reason yet unknown even to you." Clara shivered, the words settling in her chest like a weight she could neither lift nor ignore. Fate, balance, guardianship. She had spent her entire life relying on herself, on the labor of her hands, the modest security of her cabin. Yet here was a man who moved with the certainty of someone in tune with forces far beyond her. Understanding, Makia reached into a small leather pouch at his waist, pulling out a carved medallion inlaid with turquoise. He held it out to her, and Clara took it with trembling hands. The medallion felt heavy, both physically and in significance. "This is a symbol of protection," he said. "It binds you, in a way, to the tribe's vigilance, but it also marks you. Others will know." She turned the medallion over, tracing the intricate patterns with her fingers. Symbols of animals, flowing lines, and abstract shapes spoke to her intuitively. She could feel a pulse in the carvings, as if the medallion carried not just history, but life itself. "Why me?" she whispered again, almost to herself. Makia looked at her with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. "Because the wild chooses who survives and who does not. Tonight you were spared, but tomorrow the plains will test you again. You must learn to see as we see, to feel as we feel, or you will not last." Clara's eyes filled with both fear and fascination. She realized she was no longer merely a settler tending her small plot of land. She had entered a world of warriors, guardians, and rules written not in ink but in survival, courage, and loyalty. Makya's presence, silent yet commanding, had already begun to shape her reality. The sun sank lower, casting long golden shadows across the grove. Clara hugged the medallion to her chest, feeling a strange sense of purpose stirring within her. Makya's gaze softened, just enough for her to glimpse the man beneath the warrior. A protector, a guide, a being carved by loss, courage, and unwavering duty. As they walked back toward the cabin, Clara realized she was no longer alone in the wilderness. She was watched, guarded, and perhaps even chosen. And in that realization, both terror and hope began to settle side by side in her heart. The plains stretched endless around them, but for the first time, Clara felt a spark of understanding. Survival here demanded more than skill, it demanded trust, and trust, she sensed, would come at a price. The sun dipped low, painting the plains in shades of gold and crimson when the first low growl reached Clara's ears. She froze, every instinct screaming that danger had returned. Across the horizon, shadows moved with fluid menace, eyes glowing like molten gold, bodies sleek and deadly. The lions had come back, testing boundaries, drawn by the scent of a life once within reach. Clara's pulse thundered in her chest. She clutched the medallion Makya had given her, its carved turquoise surface cool against her palm. The ritual, gifts scattered around her cabin, seemed almost fragile against the raw power approaching. She had felt safe under the warrior's protection, but the wild never honored safety. From the tree line, a figure emerged like a living storm. Makya, shirtless, bronzed skin gleaming in the fading light, long black hair whipping around his face, moved with predatory grace. His tribal jewelry, bone charms, turquoise beads, and feathers caught the last rays of sun, glinting like fire. Every muscle was coiled, ready for the fight that was already unfolding in the plains. Clara could hardly keep her eyes on him as he leapt into action, spear in hand. The lions hesitated for a fraction of a second, sensing his dominance, but instinct was stronger than caution. With a roar of his own, Makya drove forward, forcing them back. Dust swirled around them, mixing with the metallic tang of blood and the scent of crushed grass. Clara scrambled to her feet, torn between fear and a desperate desire to help. She remembered the lessons her father had drilled into her as a child: never run from danger blindly, use the terrain, and stay low. Yet nothing could have prepared her for this, the raw, elemental battle unfolding before her eyes. Makya's movements were fluid, almost ritualistic. He shifted his weight, sidestepped, and thrust his spear with lethal precision. Each strike sent a lion tumbling backward, teeth snapping in frustrated rage. The sound of claws scraping against rock and dirt echoed across the plains, a grim symphony of survival. Clara's hands shook as she picked up a fallen branch, unsure if it could help but unwilling to stand idle. One lion lunged at her, its jaws snapping mere inches from her arm. Makya reacted instantly, spinning with the agility of a panther, intercepting the attack with a thrust of his spear. The lion yelped and retreated, ears flattened against its skull, eyes wide with a newfound wariness. Clara's breath came in, ragged gasps, and for the first time she understood the depth of the bond between this warrior and the land. He was not just protecting her, he was a force woven into the fabric of the plains, a sentinel of life and balance. Hours passed like moments. The lion circled, tested, and finally, after a final flurry of movement, retreated into the shadows, from which they had emerged. Their eyes glimmered in the twilight, lingering for a moment as if issuing a warning, before vanishing into the gathering darkness. Makia stood among the disturbed earth and trampled grass, chest heaving, spear dripping, with the marks of the confrontation. He looked at Clara, and for the first time that day she saw a hint of softness in his eyes. "The plains never forgive weakness," he said quietly, voice carrying both warning and reassurance. "You survived tonight, but you must understand this is not luck. It is skill, courage, and vigilance." Clara nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She felt both terror and exhilaration, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Her cabin, once a sanctuary, now felt like a fragile outpost against a wild that respected no walls or fences. Yet with Makia by her side, there was a glimmer of hope, a promise that she could endure if she learned to move with the land rather than against it. As darkness settled over the plains, stars emerging one by one in the cold night sky, Clara realized she was changing. The wild had tested her, revealed her vulnerabilities, and introduced her to courage she had not known she possessed. Makia, silent yet vigilant, remained her protector and guide, a living reminder that survival in these lands demanded more than strength. It required trust, skill, and an unyielding connection to the pulse of the earth. The night was quiet now, the distant howls fading into memory. Clara wrapped herself in a tribal blanket, medallion warm against her chest, and looked out over the plains. The lions were gone, but the lesson remained clear. In this wild, untamed land, danger would always return, and only those who respected it and the warrior who guarded it would survive. By sunrise, the plains were bathed in a soft golden light, painting long shadows across Clara's cabin and the scattered offerings surrounding it. She stepped outside cautiously, her eyes scanning the ground. Overnight, more tributes had appeared. The medallions, dried herbs, carved animals, and neatly stacked bundles of firewood seemed to hum with purpose, each arranged with precision and intent. Her pulse quickened. She felt both awe and unease. The gifts were beautiful, yes, but they were also a reminder that she was now part of something far larger than her solitary existence. The warriors' tribe had intervened, silently observing, protecting, and judging. These were not mere offerings, they were symbols of allegiance, ritual, and expectation. Makia appeared from the edge of the grove, his long black hair flowing in the morning wind. Shirtless, muscular, and adorned with his turquoise and bone jewelry, he carried a set of intricately carved weapons in his hands, a spear, a bow, and a quiver of arrows. Each weapon was polished to perfection, with designs that matched the medallion he had given Clara. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, each detail speaking of generations of skill, pride, and honor. Clara's breath caught in her throat as he laid them gently at her feet. "These are not just gifts," he said quietly, his deep voice resonating with authority and meaning. "They are tools, protection, symbols of trust and responsibility. Your survival depends on understanding their value and using them wisely." She knelt, reverently picking up the spear, feeling its weight, the balance of its tip and shaft. Every inch of it seemed alive with history and purpose. The bow's wood was smooth and strong, and the arrows were fletched with bright feathers, carefully carved tips glinting in the sunlight. Clara realized she held not just weapons, but a connection, a lifeline to the tribe and the warrior who had saved her life. Makia's eyes scanned the horizon, alert as ever. "The plains are generous, but also unforgiving," he said. "Those who take from them without respect find only danger. Tonight, you will need courage, awareness, and skill you have yet to discover." Clara nodded, a mix of fear and determination rising in her chest. She was no longer simply a farmer defending her land. She was a participant in a ritual of survival, bound by a silent pact with the tribe and the warrior who had become her guide. Throughout the morning, members of the tribe arrived silently, their presence almost ethereal. They did not speak, but their eyes watched, observing Clara as she examined the gifts. Some brought additional offerings, finely woven blankets, pouches of dried herbs, and small carvings of animals. Lions, wolves, and eagles were repeated motifs, symbols of strength, vigilance, and wisdom. Each gift reinforced the lesson that she was under the tribe's protection, but also under their judgment. Clara could feel the weight of it all, the responsibility, the scrutiny, and the power. Her solitude had ended, replaced by a life intertwined with warriors, guardians, and the unpredictable wild. The plains were no longer empty fields to wander alone. They were a living, breathing test of courage, endurance, and loyalty. By mid-afternoon, Makia approached her again, this time holding a carved medallion slightly larger than the one she already wore. "This is a symbol of unity," he explained. "It binds you to us in ways that words cannot describe. Carry it always. It will protect you and remind you of your place among those who watch these lands." Clara took the medallion, feeling its cool weight settle in her palm. The carvings were intricate, depicting animals and patterns she could not fully understand, but their significance was clear. She was now a part of something larger than herself, an alliance forged in danger, trust, and necessity. As the sun sank toward the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the plains, Clara surveyed the scene. The cabin, the gifts, the medallions, and the silent tribe all spoke of a world she had only glimpsed in stories and dreams. Makia stood nearby, silent yet vigilant, a reminder that she was not alone, but neither was she free from the expectations and dangers of this new life. For the first time, Clara understood the true meaning of survival in these lands. It was not just strength or skill, it was connection, respect, and the courage to embrace forces larger than herself. The warrior and his tribe had shown her the path, and she knew she had to walk it, step by careful step, or risk losing everything. Night fell over the plains like a heavy velvet curtain, the stars punctuating the sky with cold, distant light. Clara sat outside her cabin, wrapped in the warm tribal blanket that had been left for her, the carved medallion cool against her chest. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying scents of smoke, earth, and distant wild creatures. It was a night that demanded attention, a night when the plains themselves seemed alive, observing her every move. Makia appeared from the shadows, his shirtless, bronzed form outlined against the flickering firelight. Long black hair fell past his shoulders, and the turquoise and bone jewelry he wore caught the firelight like tiny beacons. He moved with the quiet, coiled grace of a predator, but there was a softness in his eyes as they met hers. "You are learning," he said, voice low and resonant. "The gifts, the medallions, the weapons, they are tools, yes, but also lessons. Tonight, you will understand why the plains choose to test you." Clara swallowed hard, trying to calm the nervous flutter in her chest. She had faced fear before storms, wild animals, and the harsh loneliness of the plains, but nothing had prepared her for the weight of this warrior's presence. Every motion he made, every glance he gave, carried unspoken authority. She felt simultaneously protected and exposed, like a novice standing on the threshold of a world far larger than herself. Makia gestured toward the fire, and Clara followed. The flames cast flickering shadows across his face, emphasizing the sharp lines of his jaw and the intensity of his dark eyes. He handed her a small pouch of herbs, each carefully wrapped. "These are not for healing alone," he explained. "They are reminders of life, of death, of balance. The plains reward respect and punish neglect." As they sat, Makia began to speak of his people, their history, and the code they lived by. His words were soft but heavy with meaning, carrying tales of ancestors who had guarded these lands for generations. He spoke of battles with rival tribes, of the spirits that roamed the plains, and of lions and wolves as both predators and symbols of vigilance. Clara listened, enraptured, feeling the world she thought she knew expand into something richer, more dangerous, and infinitely more beautiful. "You may wonder why your life intersected with mine," he said, looking down at her. "It is not mere chance. The plains have a way of choosing, and tonight you were chosen to see, to learn, to survive." Clara's fingers tightened around the medallion. She felt a strange connection not just to Makia, but to the tribe, too. The gifts to the land itself. Her past life of solitude and simple survival seemed small and fragile compared to the intricate dance of protection, danger, and honor that now surrounded her. Makia rose, moving closer to the fire. He traced patterns in the dirt with a finger, symbols of animals, life, and the forces that shaped the world. "Each line, each mark, is a lesson," he said. "You must learn to read the land, to understand the signs. Only then will you survive. The night and the many nights to come." Clara looked at the patterns, trying to absorb meaning from shapes that seemed both foreign and familiar. She realized that the warrior's teachings were not just about physical survival, they were about perception, intuition, and trust in herself and in those who protected her. Hours passed as the night deepened. The distant howl of a coyote echoed across the plains, and Clara shivered despite the warmth of the blanket. Makia remained silent, vigilant, yet not imposing, letting her absorb the gravity of the world she had entered. The medallion pressed against her heart felt like a heartbeat of its own, connecting her to a larger rhythm, a pulse she could not yet name but felt with every breath dot as the first hints of dawn painted the horizon in silver and pink. Clara finally spoke. I think I understand," she said, voice trembling. "The plains, the tribe, you, it's all connected." Makia nodded once, approvingly. "Yes, and tomorrow your understanding will be tested further. Courage alone is not enough. You must see, feel, and act as one with the land. Only then will you survive, and only then will you truly belong." The fire burned low, casting their long shadows across the cabin and the plains beyond. Clara felt a strange mixture of fear, hope, and anticipation. The night had revealed much, yet the mysteries of the warrior, his tribe, and the wild lands around her remained vast. She realized that her life was no longer her own, it was intertwined with forces greater than herself, and she would need every ounce of courage, trust, and awareness to navigate the path ahead. And as the stars faded and dawn broke over the horizon, Clara knew that her journey had only just begun. Dawn broke over the plains with a pale golden light, casting long shadows across Clara's cabin and the carefully arranged tributes that had multiplied over the past days. She stood at the edge of the porch, wrapped in the warm tribal blanket, her eyes scanning the horizon for the faintest movement. Her heart beat in sync with the wind whispering through the tall grasses, anticipation and unease coiling together like the rising sun. Makia appeared silently beside her, his bronzed, muscular torso catching the first rays of light, long black hair flowing over his shoulders and turquoise and bone jewelry glinting softly. His presence was commanding yet protective, the embodiment of power and vigilance. Clara felt her pulse quicken, not with fear, but with a strange, grounding reassurance of being watched over by someone whose every motion spoke of mastery and care. Then she heard it, the soft thrum of hooves against hard-packed earth. At first, it was distant, almost imperceptible, but it grew steadily, like the heartbeat of the plains itself. Clara's breath caught as she saw shapes emerging on the horizon, riders, dozens of them, cloaked in the early morning light, their forms silhouetted against the endless sky. Makia's gaze hardened, alert as ever. "They have come," he said simply. His voice carried the weight of both warning and anticipation. "Prepare yourself." As the riders drew closer, The figures became unmistakable warriors of his tribe, their skin glinting bronze in the sunlight, long hair braided or flowing freely, adorned with turquoise and bone jewelry. Each carried weapons and bundles, yet there was no menace in their eyes. Instead, there was respect, acknowledgement, and something Clara could only describe as reverence. They circled the cabin slowly, dismounting with quiet precision. One by one, they laid gifts at her doorstep, finely woven blankets, carefully carved animal figures, pouches of medicinal herbs, and dried game. Clara's hands trembled as she realized the sheer magnitude of what was happening. These were not merely tokens, they were a demonstration of honor, allegiance, and gratitude. Her life, once solitary and fragile, had become entwined with the lives, customs, and watchful eyes of an entire people. Makia stepped forward, his presence towering and commanding. "The plains tested you," he said, voice carrying over the quiet murmurs of his tribe. "You faced danger, learned their signs, and survived. For this, you are worthy of their respect and protection." Clara looked at the faces of the tribe, seeing not strangers but guardians silent, powerful, and deeply connected to the land and its rhythms. She felt tears prick her eyes, a mixture of gratitude, awe, and the realization that her world had been irrevocably transformed. One of the elders, a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes as sharp as the eagle she had carved into her necklace, stepped forward. She placed a small bundle in Clara's hands, a hand-woven sash patterned with symbols she did not fully understand. "This binds you to us," the elder said softly, voice rich with centuries of wisdom. "You are no longer alone. You are watched, guided, and honored." Clara sank to her knees, overwhelmed. The weight of the medallion, the tribal blanket, and now the sash pressed upon her like a mantle of responsibility and belonging. She had survived lions, learned the ways of the land, and been judged worthy by a warrior and a tribe she barely understood. And yet, in that moment, she felt a profound sense of peace, a recognition that she was part of something greater than herself, a living story woven into the heart of the plains. Makia knelt beside her, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You have seen the wild, survived its tests, and embraced its lessons," he said. "From this day forward, you are part of us. We protect, guide, and honor those who honor the land. The plains will always watch you, but now so will we." The sun rose fully, bathing the plains in gold. Clara looked around her, seeing the warrior, his tribe, and the gifts that symbolized trust and survival. Her heart swelled with a mixture of awe, gratitude, and quiet triumph. She realized that she had not merely been rescued, she had been chosen, tested, and welcomed into a world of courage, honor, and enduring connection. As the warriors mounted their horses and rode off into the vast expanse of the plains, Clara felt a surge of strength and resolve. The wild had tested her, the warrior had guided her, and the tribe had accepted her. She was no longer merely a woman surviving alone, she was part of a living story, bound by courage, ritual, and the enduring heartbeat of the plains. And in that golden morning light, Clara knew one undeniable truth. She would never face the world the same way again.